be understood less as passive obedience than as an evolving ethic of intergenerational responsibility, one that includes emotional support, practical care, and even forms of a respectable moral challenge within the parent-child relationship. Even so, these reinterpretations do not fully resolve the problem. They may answer the charge that Confucian ethics is inherently hostile to individuality, but they do not by themselves address family dysfunction, unequal authority, gendered care burdens, or the problems of what counts as exemplary parenthood. Nor can filial piety today be discussed apart from contemporary socio-political realities. In societies such as South Korea and Japan, rapid population aging and persistent old age poverty place heavy pressures on families, while educational competition and long study hours place new strains on parent-child relations and human well-being. Pretty often, we can see that in these societies, family ceases to be a place for moral cultivation and civic formation, and it cannot sustain even a liable home. Recent critics of Confucian family-centered value therefore argue that it is not enough to reaffirm moral duty within the family. One must also ask how welfare institutions, labor arrangements, communal care, and public policy either support or help family care. In this setting, filial piety needs to be reconsidered, not so much as a self-sufficient private virtue, but as part of a larger consideration of mutual care, social responsibility, and institutional support. The relation between family and wider society has also been central to Western political philosophy, though in a different register. Even traditions that rigidly distinguish public from private life have usually treated the family as significant because it shapes the moral dispositions of future citizens. Rawls is especially important here. He treats the family as a part of a society's basic structure, and he recognized that the family helps cultivate the sense of justice which is needed for a well-ordered society. But this very move also opened the floor and then door to further criticism. If the family helps from and then help forms the citizens, then it cannot be treated simply as a protected private sphere. It must also be examined as a social institution with profound consequences for equality, justice, and civic formation. From that point onward, contemporary debates about family or family feeling develop in several directions. Communitarian critics of liberalism emphasize that persons are not formed in abstraction, but within constitutive communities that shape identity, moral judgment, and practical orientation. From that perspective, the family appears as a privileged site of belonging and ethical formation. Feminist theory, by contrast, insists that the family cannot be romanticized as a safe place beyond the politics, precisely because it is a site of dependence, socialization, and unequal power. It must be examined in terms of gendered labor, coercion, domination, and state's role in sustaining or reforming unjust arrangements. The result is a more complex picture of family life. The family is neither merely private nor automatically moral, but rather a domain in which affection, vulnerability, hierarchy, and justice are deeply entangled. This workshop begins from this entanglement. Rather than treating the family as a self-evident or politically secondary sphere, it asks how family feelings such as love, duty, gratitude, ressentiment, dependence, loyalty, and care traverse across the East and West, and how it is shaped by wider moral, social, and institutional arrangements. More specifically, we are going to investigate the diverse thoughts of family or family feeling across cultures by attempting to answer these questions. First, can family feeling serve as a shared moral sources across cultures? Second, family feeling guide socio-political judgment in a reliable way. Third, what principles can help us correct dysfunctional or unjust family relations? In my view, today's talk speaks very directly to the aims of our book project. It takes up one of the project's most difficult questions. How can family feeling become politically meaningful without turning the family into a direct model for the state or the world? More specifically, the paper addresses this question by criticizing an influential tendency in contemporary Confucian political ethics, namely the assumption that the moral feelings and virtues cultivated within the family can move rather naturally into political life. By turning to Aristotle, the paper offers a different account. The family is certainly an important beginning of moral formation, but it is not itself a model of political community, nor can family feeling become a shared civic or global morality without political mediation. What I find myself, kind of particularly valuable is the paper's focus on political mediation. It shows that the real issue is not simply whether filial piety or family feeling matters for political life, but under what public and institutional conditions such feelings can become civic virtues. Through Aristotle's account of political rule, the paper argues that family feeling must pass through law, public education, citizenship, deliberation, and the reciprocal practice of ruling and being ruled. In this sense, the paper helps us to see both the limits of familiar political isomorphism in some Confucian accounts and the institutional conditions under which family feeling might become a publicly justified form of democratic civility. The Global Justice Workshop series this semester is organized around the family feeling across East and West, a book project for volume number 13 of the Routledge series of political theories in East Asian context. Contributors whose papers are closely related have generously agreed to serve as guest moderators for each other. Our guest moderator today is Professor Anna Becker from the Department of History of Ideas at Aarhus University in Denmark. Let me introduce her briefly here. Anna Becker is a professor of History of Ideas at Aarhus University, Denmark. She earned her PhD in history and her master in the history of political thought from University of Cambridge, and her diploma in political science from Free University in Berlin. Her research focuses on early modern political thought, gender, materiality. This is one of the most difficult words, I can pronounce every time, and the body politics. She's the author of Gendering the Renaissance Commonwealth, which was published by Cambridge University Press 2020. Co-editor of Radical Republicanism, which was published by Brill 2025. And she's currently completing Politics That Matter, the materiality of the body politics from 1500 to 1800. All right, Anna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and thank you for your absolutely generous introduction, and sorry that I had to move.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for making the time for us today. And then now I'd like to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you also for being a part of this project. I've been learning a lot, and thank you for making me the moderator of this wonderful paper. And I will, before we go into the discussion, it's an honor now to introduce our speaker. And you have, of course, read her wonderful chapter already. And apologies in advance for my horrible pronunciation. So Mengjia Wang is Associate Professor at the School of Public Administration in Sichuan University. She received her PhD in Political Science from Renmin University of China and was a joint PhD student at Northwestern University. Before joining the faculty at Sichuan University, she taught at Anhui University and held a postdoctoral fellowship at Sun Yat-sen University. Her research lies at the intersection of the history of Western political thought and contemporary political philosophy, with particular interest in Aristotle's political thought, liberalism, communitarianism, republicanism, and global justice. Her major articles include Displacing the Christian Theodicy of Hell, which just sounds amazing. Cannot wait to read it. And Politicality and the Common Good, an inquiry based on Aristotle's Politics. All very timely and all very related to what we have read and what we're going to discuss today. So so this was my introduction, and I'm very, a very warm welcome also from my side. And sort of my role is to moderate, but also to comment and to give some questions myself. So therefore, I'm going to start this point of the proceedings now. And as I said earlier, but I will repeat it again, thank you for, for letting me read this thought-provoking work. So Professor Wang wrote, Professor Wang's work has a snappy title, Against Isomorphic Extension from Family to Polis, Aristotle on Family, Education and Political Rule, and this is what it is about. It's a wonderfully rich paper, and in it, Professor Wang's central interest is in locating the exact relational position of the family to the political, which is in a way what this project is about, and it's a very admirable undertaking because this is about the exact location. Starting from modern reading of Confucian ethics, Professor Wang addresses the question as to how family feelings, and with that I take it you mean sort of morality practiced in the family and through the ties that bind them together, can be translated into the public sphere. So how exactly can we make citizens of civic virtue who have democratic civility from the family? And she places that sort of interest into first sort of contemporary Confucian political theory, and suggests that Confucianism leaves open the mechanics of this. And for that then, and in order to figure out these mechanics of how we get from the family to the state and how morality and ethics go from one to the other, she turns to Aristotle. I mean, as we all do, she turns to Aristotle on Aristotelian practical ethics, and suggest that Aristotelian ethics and practical philosophy presents an enticing solution. Aristotle's practical ethics is interesting to her, she points out, because it is not liberal. It does take the family seriously. It does not present the family as a private, apolitical entity. So we have a family feeling here. In Aristotle, Professor Wang writes, the family has a formative role for moral understanding, but it is crucially determined by the very constitution in which it exists. And most importantly, and that is one of the points, it needs to be mediated. So family feelings need to be mediated to make sense in the political sphere. And this is, in her reading of Aristotle, the role of law and civil institutions. So the family, she therefore says, is not political in Aristotle. In Confucian political ethics, as read in modern political theory, on the other hand, the state and the world, she writes, are, this is a quote, simulacra of the family, and the family is, quote, the primary source of social and political order. She quotes then newer research that complicates this picture a little, but the central problem remains, namely that, quote, if family feeling is morally formative, by what mediating process can dispositions first cultivated in asymmetrical relationships become publicly approvable of civility among free and equal citizens? So the family is a space of inequality. The polis is a space of equality, and how can we make this happen? To lay her argument down, the chapter begins by what I can not praise enough, a wonderfully subtle and complex reading, mainly of book 1 of the Politics and book 8 of the Nicomachean Ethics. Is really among the best treatments of this topic that I have read in recent years. In the first part of her chapter, Professor Wang shows that in Aristotle, that's the that's the title of a first subchapter in Aristotle, quote, household rule is not political rule. Against a reading that understands Aristotle as positioning the family and the polis as isomorphic spaces, Professor Wang argues brilliantly that Aristotle uses the family exactly to show what rule in the state is not, that is, where it fails and where the analogies do not hold. So this is the originality of this reading. She says it's important that Aristotle talks about the family, but he actually introduces the family to show the boundaries of, what the family can do. So the family makes obvious where the boundaries of the political are placed. And the most important point here regards the wife-husband relationship, which Aristotle holds to be a constitutional or a political relationship. This treatment of particularly the wife-husband relationship exposes, and again a quote, not so much a deficit in moral psychology as a permanent asymmetrical hierarchy built into the very fabric of the oikos. The significance of marital rule then is not that the household already contains the political in embryo, but even that the most political looking household relations have a qualitative rupture, a difference in kind that prevents any seamless normative extension from the family to the polis. That's on page 5. So familial relations, Professor Wang writes, cannot be identified with political rule. Yes, and this is actually what I want to talk about for the next hour, but we'll come to the next. But I really want to say it is very original. So in the next subchapter, Professor Wang turns to a subject often neglected in Aristotle's political theory, namely that in both ethics and in the politics, he states firmly that constitutions, politeia, need to be geared towards both women and children. So this is in Politics 1 and 8. And this is her main point, the education of children is part of the duties of the polis. So that's in the Nicomachean Ethics. Citizens that educate their children just as they please without an eye to the common good might be, Aristotle warns, destructive to the community. And this is, I have to name him, actually a point that Machiavelli should make 1800 years later. So that's a long-standing discussion where education is placed. The family, Professor Wang says, is, that's her word, transitional. Children learn effective attachments, but this is only pre-civic, since familial affection cannot simply be extended into the polis and become political without problems. This, Professor Wang takes as Aristotle's main point. The love in the family cannot just be extended into the bigger polis. She then ponders citizenship and civic virtue, arguing that following from the above, citizen friendship, philia, is qualitatively different than the love and affection one receives in and distributes among the family and the family members. Just as in Hannah Arendt's reading, who you're actually not quoting, so that's also interesting, what makes citizens function is the polis, and the civic life spent judging, acting under the law, holding offices, participating in the reciprocal practices of ruling and being ruled. So not in the home, but in the city and in its laws and maybe its codes, its moral codes, the city is made and shaped. Going from household to the political life thus requires different qualities and a distinct civic standing, virtue, distinct civic virtues, civic relations. It's not an enlargement of familial affections. We should not confuse family feelings with political action and with deliberation, warns Professor Wang, but for pre-civic dispositions need to be translated into public institutions. While the family is the space of love, it is also that of hierarchies. And we should be careful to not transport these from the family households to our political homes. And this is sort of the way that I read it. Later on, you can maybe tell me whether I've read it correctly. But now I will ask you 3 questions, one after the other, and then we will open the floor. So many questions, but maybe we can start with the point about that I take very well. Yes?
Anna, we better, kind of have her talk, first before, kind of giving her kind of questions and open the floor. So it is
I'm sorry.
time
I thought I'd do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
it's all right. It's all right. It's
Oh,
a very
sorry.
wonderful introduction, but it is time we have to have, kind of,
Of
Professor
course, I was
Huang's,
so
his
excited.
presentation.
Oh,
It
I
is
know this very
okay.
well.
Okay, thank you very
It's
much. Now
okay.
it is time for, kind of letting her speak.
It's okay. Thank you very much, Professor Becker, and for moderating this session, and for your kind introduction, and for reading my paper so carefully. And thanks, Professor Kwa, for inviting me to join the chapter and giving a lecture here. So I'm also grateful to everyone for being here today. So in the following presentation, please allow me to give a talk that is titled Against Isomorphic Extension from Family to Polis. So because my PPT somehow is not fitting into the screen, so I'm asking Ian to help me to present the PPT. So, okay, so let's start. Okay. I have to adjust my PPT exactly as what you presented. So in the second page. All right. My lecture would be mainly focused on the central question: can moral dispositions grounded in intimate family affection directly scale up to publicly justifiable civic virtue or democratic civility? So I will start with some introduction first. Recent debates on filial piety and family feelings, especially those emphasizing parental love and remonstration, have done important work in resisting portraits of Confucian ethics as demanding, only blind obedience. In particular, discussions of parental love have shown that filial piety is rooted in a prior relationship of familial care through which children first cultivate moral responsiveness, gratitude, trust, and concern for others. Similarly, recent discussions of remonstration have also shown that children may be encouraged to admonish morally failing parents. So all these talks have thereby preserved a space for moral judgment within the parent-child relationship. So taken together, I think these debates have made family feelings a very serious moral source, instead of a mere residue of patriarchal hierarchy. So the central question, therefore, is whether those moral dispositions grounded primarily in family feelings can be directly translated into publicly approvable forms of civility. So particularly 2 questions remains unsolved. Can asymmetrical family relations generate civic relation, particularly civic equality? And can family affection become public judgment? So please, next page. So the question is especially present because a powerful strand of Confucian political ethics has long understood as the political through an analogy, or even we can say an isomorphism between family and the polity. According to the standard interpretation associated with Liang Qichao, classic Confucianism extends moral virtues first cultivated within the family to the state and even to the world, 天下, with little substantive revision. So on this view, there is a continuous normative sequence running from the individual to family and to the state and the 天下. So that aims contemporary version offers more philosophical, ambitious contemporary, contemporary version of this view. For aims, family feelings, especially filial piety, he understood as family reverence. It is not merely a domestic virtue, but the minimalist morality of the Confucian conception of the political. And he explicitly presents Confucian politic order as grounded in the isomorphism of family, state, and the world, in which state and the world are just similarical of the family. From this perspective, the primary source of both social and political order lies particularly in the family and in the family-based practices of xiao and li. And at this juncture, Joseph Chen also engaged in this isomorphic reading. And his engagement is very critical and also very important. And Joseph Chen has argued that we must distinguish several claims too often conflated under the formula that Confucianism exercises politics. One may hold that politics should promote the good life, or that political order depends on the virtues of political actors, without holding that politics is modeled on the family. Chen reinforces this point by showing that ruler-ruled relation differs from the father-son relation, and the Confucian texts articulate severe virtues applicable to strangers and non-familiar contexts. And the relationship-based obligations must be constrained by fairness and impartiality in public affairs. So his argument therefore weakens the assumption that the Confucian political philosophy is governed by a single logic of family extension. Yet however, it still leaves open the question central to this talk. If family feelings is morally formative, by what mediating process can dispositions first cultivated in asymmetrical relations become publicly approvable forms of civility among free and equal citizens? Next page, please. So this chapter will therefore addresses that problem by turning to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and Politics. The core thesis is Aristotle provides a structural account of why family feeling is morally formative, but it cannot be directly converted into political virtue. If it wants to become civic virtue, it can become civic virtue only through institutional mediation. So three theses are laid out here. They are a difference in kind. First, difference in kind. Household rule is not a political rule. And the oikos is organized different way from the polis. And the second is the transitional beginning, that is family habituation initiates model formation, but it's not self-sufficient. It must be reoriented by public education toward the politeia. And the third is civic rearticulation. So the argument will goes around citizenship and political friendship, so which will be laid out later in detail. Next page, please. So so I will give you a brief introduction of the structure of the argument. The first, household rule is not a political rule. Household rule is internally differentiated, and none of its forms can serve as a direct model for political rule among citizens. And then the next section will move to child education and the politeia to show that early habituation is pedagogical but transitional, becoming civic only when reoriented by common education toward the politeia. And the third part is about citizenship, civic virtue, and political friendship. This part will establish citizenship as a distinct public standing that rearticulates relational agency into civic virtue and political friendship. And then in the last part, I will lay out how the political rule is institutional mediation. There are four we can see from throughout the Aristotle's politics: law, equal civic standing, deliberation and judgment, and rotation. They all together reconstitute family feeling as publicly accountable civic virtue. Next page, please. So in my first part, household is not political rules. I will start with the beginning of Aristotle's statement in the Politics. Here he rejects scale equivalence. He said he criticized those who suppose that the statesman, king, household manager, and master are essentially the name, different not in kind, but only in the number of those ruled. So on this mistaken view, there would be no real difference between a great household and a small state. So Aristotle is strongly objects that kind of view. So his point is oikos and polis differ in kind, not merely in size. So I think to understand this difference, we must therefore examine the specific forms of rule internal to the household and ask why none of them taken by itself can serve as a model for rule among citizens. A complete household, Aristotle says, consists of slaves and free men, and its primary and smallest parts are three distinct pairs: master and slave, husband and wife, and father and children. So the corresponding forms of rule are mastery rule or despotic rule, and second is parental rule. And the third is marital rule. So Aristotle's differentiation of the household rule is tied to his contested account of deliberative authority within the household. The slave is said to lack the deliberative capability altogether, and the female to possess it without authority, and the child to possess it in an immature or incomplete form. I think there are many good reasons and very sufficient reasons to reject this hierarchy of modern psychology. However, if we read less as a defensible psychology of exclusion than as a contrast, as a diagnostic contrast, these passages can clarify the distance between household rule and political rule. The cases for slave and women are particularly revealing. The former marks the points at which rule becomes despotic instead of political, while the latter about women shows that even the possession of deliberative capacity and even some participation in household authority is not yet sufficient for political rule. So what Aristotle's analysis brings into view here then is not a hierarchy that can be extended from household to polis, but the demanding conditions under which rule can count as politic at all. So I think I will briefly say something about different rule, about mastery rule and paternal rule and marital rule. So mastery rule is, we can say, precisely at the extreme if we measure against political rule. The mastery rule is the slave is treated as a living possession and as an instrument for life. And the so-called natural slave is one who belongs to another and participates in reason only by perceiving it, without possessing it. So, and paternal rule also differs from political rule, though in another way. Aristotle says that both wife and children are ruled as free persons, but the father rules children kingly because the relation is structured by the asymmetry between the older and the complete and the younger and the incomplete. So it's logical, it's pedagogical, and developmental instead of reciprocal. And so the decisive case, next page. The decisive case is marital rule. Why it matters? Because marital rule is the household relation Aristotle brings closest to political rule. And what exactly makes it close? Because the wife is a free person with deliberative capacity and participates in household deliberation, right? And where it fails is the hierarchy remains permanent rather than rotation. It lacks some mechanism of ruling and being ruled in turn. So in the text, Aristotle says that the male is permanently related to female in this way, which is ruling permanently. I think this text is very illuminating because it marks the establishes a limited analogy and marks its boundary. In political rule, the difference between ruler and ruled is temporary and office bound. The ruler and the ruled change their places because they are understood to be equal in nature and without relevant difference. But by contrast, in marital relation, they don't rotate. The asymmetry does not rotate. So some scholars have been argued that the analogy between marital and political rule cannot be reduced to mere consultation, persuasion, or benevolent command. The analogy is to have force. The wife must contribute in some way to the deliberative decisions that govern the household. But this deliberative contribution remains compatible with permanent hierarchy, which is the husband retains the final authority, and the wife's participation does not amount to an independent or rotating share in rule. So by demonstrating some scholars provide a more generous reading of women's rational capacity. They say women are not intellectual defective and household deliberation is real. However, it also clarifies the barrier to political rule within the household. The barrier is not cognitive. It's not intellectual, but structural, but fundamentally structural. So the marital rule still lacks the essential mechanism of taking turns by which citizens authorize, exchange, and contest the rule. So therefore, what the marital rule exposes is not so much a deficit in moral psychology as a permanent asymmetrical hierarchy built into the very fabric of the Holy Course. The significance here then is the household already contains the political, but that even the most political looking household relation reveals a qualitative rupture, a difference in kind that prevents any seamless normative extension from the family to the polis. Next page, please. So the first part gives us the negative starting point of the argument. Aristotle does not treat the household as a small version of the polis. The household contains real forms of authority, care, command, and education, but these relations are asymmetrical and non-rotating. And even marital rule, which comes closest to political rule, still lacks the reciprocal standing through which citizens rule and are ruled in turn. So the key point is not that family is morally insignificant. Instead, the family cannot serve as a direct model for political rule. The movement from the oikos to the polis is therefore not an enlargement of household authority, but a shift to a different kind of rule. That is reciprocal, civic, and publicly constituted. Let's move to the second part. Next page. So having established that household rule cannot be identified with political rule, we now may consider a more confined version of the family extension thesis. It's not the claim that family is structurally identical with the state, but the claim that family education is the earliest school of public-minded virtue. I will just say some example here, some sources here. In Guo Qiyong's reading of Cai Yuanpei, Xiao is not blind and absolute obedience to an authoritative father, but a formative practice through which the moral sentiments of private life can be expanded into public responsibility. So Cai's own formulation as cited by Guo is that family is the first school of life, and that a good family is the basis of the flourishing of society and the state. Guo acknowledges that family and the state are not the same, and the private virtue and public virtue are distinct. However, he insists that family love can still be extended to groups, society, and the state through a process that proceeds from oneself to others, 由己及他, and from the inner to the outer, 由内及外. So in this sense, family affection, healthy family life, and filial virtue are not merely private sentiments, but the starting point and original driving force of civic formation. 公民教育的起点和原动力. So another source we can find in Kling's study, she gives this claim a more specific development formulation. On her reading, early Confucian thinkers regarded the earliest stage of family life as the primary context in which children's ethical sensibilities, emotional responsiveness, habits of trust, and the capacities for sympathy first take shape. These early family experiences are therefore not merely private. They help explain how persons become capable of broader virtues and why the quality of family life bears on the quality of society. I think Aristotle by no means dismisses the moral weight of the household. Rather, he positions it as an indispensable matrix for early character habituation, early character formation through habituation. So in the Nicomachean Ethics, he explicitly compares domestic and civic habituation, just as in a city, the provisions of law and the types of character have influence. Similarly, a father's words and habits have influence within the household and shape children through kinship, affection, and parental benefaction. If we given Aristotle's further claim that household is pariah in Genesis and earlier and more necessary than the polis, we might naturally expect some domestic habituation to unfold continuously into civic virtue. However, at precisely this point, Aristotle breaks with the family or civic continuity thesis. The household is pariah in the order of Genesis, but this priority does not make domestic habituation the norm of civic virtue or civility. It does not generate its own civic standard. So the household can begin moral formation, but it cannot by itself determine what counts as civic virtue. I think let's go back to the beginning of politics. In that section, in the beginning, Aristotle distinguished household's priority, right, in coming to be from the polis status as a complete community. The polis comes into being for the sake of living, but exists for the sake of living well. And the person who first constituted the polis is said to be the cause of the greatest good. So the movement from household to polis is not a change of scale, but a difference in kind, right? Particularly marked above all by the institutional condition of equal standing under which logos is exercised. So Aristotle does say that community in these things, that is, in the perception and the disclosure of good and bad, just and unjust, makes a household and a polis. However, the logos mediated disclosure in the household does not make the disclosure political in a strict sense. Political disclosure requires reciprocal deliberative standing among those who are free and equal, or similar to share in ruling and being ruled in turn. And such equal standing is not produced by family affection itself. It must be constituted and secured by law and politeia. So that distinction, next page, please. That distinction explains why in the end of Nicomachean Ethics, even paternal education is said to be better when the father acquires legislative science. It's different, knowledge, science, legislative science. So the household can initiate the habituation, but it cannot supply from within itself the public standard by which habituation becomes civic formation. So at this juncture, Aristotle insistence that education should be public is very, important. The same passage actually in Nicomachean Ethics also says that it is best for habituation, education, for such care to be carried out communally and correctly. And only if the community neglects it does it become fitting for each individual to promote the virtue of his own children and friends. The previous page, I haven't finished the previous page. Please go back to the previous page. That is public education and the politeia, yes. Okay. So in politics, book 8, chapter 1, it sharpens this point by relocating education from the household to the politeia. There he says that education must be suited to each constitution. And since the whole city-state has one single end, education too must be one and the same for all. And its supervision must be common rather than private. So here, there are 3 claims we might need to pay attention to. First, education belongs to the concern of the legislator. education is not merely a household matter. The formation of future citizens belongs to the care of legislation. And the second, education should be oriented to the politeia. Civic formation must be suited to the politeia, it's not as indoctrination, but as the cultivation of the character needed to sustain and reform common life. And third, Aristotle frames education through the part-whole relation. This argument is not be read as a strong holist or communitarian thesis, according to which the good of the polis simply prescribes the good of the individual. The point is rather that the formation of citizens is inseparable from the common life of the polis. Since each citizen is part of the polis, the formation of each cannot be left to the household alone. But this does not mean the polis owns the child. It only means that civic virtue requires public conditions under which citizens can come to deliberate and judge together under the rule of law instead of merely conformed under coercion. Next page, please. So the second part modifies the first conclusion. Although household rule is not political rule, the household still has an important formative role. Aristotle does not deny that children first acquire habits of care, obedience, gratitude, and responsiveness within the family. In this sense, family is prior in Genesis and indispensable for early moral habituation. But this priority is not normative self-sufficiency. Domestic habituation does not by itself determine what counts as civic virtue. To become civic, early moral formation must be reoriented by public education and by the politeia. So the family begins moral formation, but cannot by itself make that formation civic. This leads to the next question. What kind of public standard transforms pre-civic moral formation into civic agency? Next page. The preceding sections have shown first, household is not political, and second, household education is only a transitional beginning of civic formation. These arguments leave open a further question. Since domestic formation is already oriented to the polis, the issue is not what must be externally added to a private household. It is how moral dispositions first formed through household relations are re-articulated once the child is no longer considered simply a member of a household, but as someone being formed but for participation in a political community. So this transition hold on. So this transition should not be described as the enlargement of family affection. It's not, citizen is not kinship generalized. It is a distinct public standing that relocates moral agency into relations of deliberation, judgment, and accountability. So let's start with Aristotle's definition of the citizenship. His
Huang
point is, yes.
Time is running out. Could you jump a bit, kind of with that, and then point out several pages, which is important for you?
Okay,
Okay,
sure.
you have 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, so his definition is of citizenship is one who is entitled to share in deliberative and judicial offices. And the citizenship is not birth, residence, or kinship in large. It is a public standing constituted by the politeia. So from household roles of care and difference to public reason giving and accountability. So by in this sense, the civic virtue is not the virtue of the good person, and I think we might all very familiar about this point, so I'm not going to elaborate more. It's not good person, right? Not good. The virtue of good person. Aristotle gives some example like sailors on a common voyage. They contribute to distinct civic functions, and civic virtue is the knowledge and the ability to deliberately judge, obey, and rule as citizens. Next page, please. So under this, in this sense, understood, in this sense, we can say that political friendship, we can find a better explanation. In my understanding, political friendship is not familiar affection, right, large, but a civic relation constituted by equality, reciprocity, and shared judgment in common action. Is distinct from kinship, and it has equal civic standing. Its defining mark is not intimacy, but the equality of citizens before one another, particularly ruling in turn. Even when it involves ruler and ruled, the relation is reciprocal, not natural or kingly. So the passage about homonoia in Nicomachean Ethics, he said, concord is not mere agreement or shared feeling. It's neither utility friendship nor virtue friendship, but sui generis civic failure, a civic relation mediated by justice, equality, and common judgment. Next page. So I think this is where some confusion, contemporary confusion, appropriations of Aristotle become problematic. They are right. So the problem is not relationality itself, but the assumption that family role-based relation can directly become civic relations. They are right in three senses. Moral agency is relational, not atomistic. Family and feelings is moral formative, and politics is not merely instrumental. However, Aristotle adds something different. Relations are political differentiated. The oracles and the polis organize authority, equality, and judgment differently. Family roles are not yet civic roles. They are deeply shaped by particular attachment, asymmetry, dependence, and difference. And citizenship gives relational agents a civic form. Next page. So, all in all, we might wonder what particularly the institutional mediation that translate the moral disposition that was cultivated in the family to the public civilities. So I will just simply lay out the political rule here as to prove that it could be an institutional mediation. The first is authority of law. It depersonalizes moral concern. Law prevents political judgment from remaining a matter of personal discretion. paternal benevolence or familial favoritism. And the second is a free and equal standing. It transforms household hierarchy. Citizens meet one another not as dependents, juniors, or objects of care, but as free and sufficiently equal participants in the politia. And the third is deliberation and judgment, turns moral concern into public reason. What is good, just, or advantageousness must be articulated before non-king who can contest, judge, and demand reasons. And the fourth is rotation and accountability. This makes authority reversible. Ruling and being ruled in turn prevents office from becoming the permanent possession of the virtuous, elderly, noble, or powerful. Next page, please. So, a question might be raised about the rotation. Why exactly must superiority be confined with such a reversible procedure instead of allowed to justify permanent rule? So I think politics, book 7, chapter 14 provides the most explicit justification for this. There, he argues that under ordinary human conditions, political justice requires authority to circulate. No citizen may permanently possess office unless his superiority across a divine threshold. So, why rotation is necessary? Because our citizens, as long as they are sufficient alike, permanent rule treats equals as unequals. And what rotation exactly does, it has both anti-despotic function and educative function, and it is reciprocal. It prevents office from becoming a private possession, and citizens learn both to rule under law and to be ruled as future rulers. And authority becomes reversible instead of permanent. So that permanent rule has a divine threshold. So actually, this text could also be read as a limit. It would be justified only if the ruler were as superior to others as a god or hero as to ordinary human beings. And next page, please. So I think in the contrast with Confucian, political ethics become clear. Confucianism can morally discipline and justify hierarchy through Tao, virtue, ritual, and the authority of sages. It can also criticize rulers by appealing to a normative order higher than the ruler's personal will. However, there should be law, right? And equal civic standing, public deliberation and judgment, rotation, and accountability. So I will just conclude my lecture. The argument of this chapter is not family is politically irrelevant. Aristotle gives house a real formative role. But this formative role is transitional instead of self-sufficient. Family feelings become civic only when transformed through public education, citizenship, law, deliberation, and reciprocal rule. And family feelings requires institutional mediation. Aristotle helps us see what Confucian family extension tends to under-theorize. The public conditions, institutional conditions under which care, reverence, and responsiveness can become civic virtues instead of partiality or subjection or domination. So I think in that sense, Aristotle is very helpful. Law renders moral concern publicly accountable. Civic education reorients habituation toward the politeia, and citizenship gives persons a standing not reducible to kinship, and the reciprocal participation in ruling and being ruled prevents moral authority from hardening into permanent domination. So family feelings, Confucian politics need not abandon family feelings. Is still very important, and it may remain a beginning of moral life, but only through institutional mediation can it become a publicly justifiable civic virtue or democratic civility. Thank you very much for listening. I think this is all.
Thank you very much indeed for this wonderful presentation that also actually took some things that I wanted to ask and clarify them. So that was really wonderful. I got amazing instructions, but I decided to give the sort of my reading of your wonderful paper first. So I will jump in straight with the question. So the further proceedings is that I ask you 3 questions, but you will answer after each, and then I'll open the floor. Yes, so thanks for your presentation. I just have to find this. So honestly, I have many more than 3, but I will try to be concise. So my first question is related to, I think, your penultimate slide, or we don't have to look at it, but it is about political friendship. I mean, you make this case so eloquently that these are different beasts, so to speak, that the friendship in the political sphere is not at all just an extension of the household. However, so in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle writes, and I just quote this: friendship seems to hold cities together. Lawgivers to care more about friendship, or it seems that they care more about friendship than about justice. For concord seems to be something like friendship, and this is what they aim at most of all, while taking special pains to eliminate civil conflict as something hostile. And when people are friends, they have no need of justice, while when they are just, they need friendship as well. So, of course, Aristotle is deeply here attacking a sort of very personalized idea of the political and says, look, we need more than friendship, we need justice. And this is sort of the point you're making, right? But he definitely explains that friendship is important. So it is indeed philia, love, that still holds these citizens together. Now, in your treatment, what you then call mediation from the family, the political sphere becomes, in my mind, almost modern. So friendship, friendship in your reading just means that equal men deliberate and act, they legislate, they are constrained by institutions and the law. So this is kind of also what you explained to us, what that philia in the political sphere is, but but I wonder really about the content, the emotive content of that friendship. So where in your account, why is there friendship and philia as an effect in the political sphere? Or in other words, is that needed at all? So, but why, in other words, why do we need to then call that relationship that these equal men have when they deliberate together? Why is this then friendship, or in what way is this friendship? and you know, sort of friendship as opposed to, let's say, just people acting, you know, under the law and according to rules together. So why and where do we need the friendship in the political sphere, and what makes it friendship as a feeling, as an effect? That would be my first question.
Okay, so will you just ask question all together, or should I answer one by one?
I'd love if you just take it one by one, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. I thank you very much for the wonderful question. And actually, poly-friendship in Aristotle has been one of my research themes for quite a long time. So I take this point very seriously. I also think your question helps me see how to improve my arguments in the paper. At this moment, I think my argument may sound a little too institutional, because I emphasize law, citizenship, public education, deliberation, and rotation. So if I bring poly-friendship more clearly into the paper, I can show that Aristotle's view is not only about institutions, I think, but also about the civic bonds and the shared attachments that those institutions make possible. So I think in my understanding, political friendship matters because it is formed among citizens who do not already share the same judgment. They have different interests, different claims about justice, and different fears of domination. And for this reason, law alone is not enough. Institution rule is not enough. So political friendship also requires practice of speaking, listening, persuading, and being persuaded. So this is where Aristotle's rhetoric becomes very important, I think. For Aristotle, rhetoric works through three mechanisms, right? Logos, ethos, and pathos. So it shapes judgment partly by shaping emotions. So the effective dimension of political friendship lies in my reading, citizens' willingness to listen to one another and to be moved by one another's claim, and to deliberate with a basic level of trust, and to finally accept a common decision, even when their own view does not prevail. So, but this is still not family warmth, I think. It's a civic effect formed through political practice. That's my answer.
This is wonderful, and this I absolutely then take. So yes, so if you just make this clear, because it's really about the sharing, you know, the sharing of the political.
Yes.
And if you make this more clear, because right now they seem to live in maybe 19th century Germany, but you know, just the rule of the law is so important. But in how you write, but if you bring in this, if you bring in the rhetorical and the sharing, I think that would be amazing and wonderful.
Because we must not forget that I will revise accordingly.
But, you know, this is a different word, and, you know, what you share, and basically, I mean, you know, historically what they share is not only the word, but this is also, you know, money and possession and young boys and so on, but we're not getting into that maybe later. But so I think that is, that makes complete sense. But
thank you.
So, but then maybe just on this strand, because I absolutely take it, and I think you're absolutely right that the family is this hierarchical space, right? And then the polis, at least if we have a constitution that is political, constitutional in that sense, where people deliberate, because there are also other constitutions, of course, where citizens look differently. But if we take this kind of constitution where the citizen is the one who has this reciprocal relationship of ruling and being ruled in turn, then we still, we still have the problem that the hierarchical family operates with, women who are, servants who don't have to have anything to say, but women who actually have deliberative capacity but are not allowed. And how do you want to account for this? I mean, how can we take women into the civic sphere? Because it's actually the political sphere, because the civic is Roman, but how can we put it into the political sphere? Because, I mean, I take it that it is that if we want to take Aristotle seriously, we also have to take seriously that while we like that these are equal citizens, these are male property bearing citizens in a certain tax bracket. So these are not the have-nots. This is not all male. This is also not, these are just family fathers in a certain tax bracket who have possession. And this whole, the why they can, share in the deliberation and in practicing and talking is precisely because they have that household behind them in which, mothers, for example, or the wives actually rule their part, so they don't have to do that. So how do we get from that hierarchical household to an equal space and sort of now including people who Aristotle has not included? Clearly not, and also structurally not. Because the only people, but the only people who have an equal relationship in the family are brothers, so you have fraternity, and you can maybe transpose this. But what do we do with the female, with women? How can we make them equal citizens?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. I think this question asked me to clarify not only the problem of women, but also what Aristotle means by hierarchy. So from my reading, Aristotle's hierarchy is not a vertical, fixed order, right? So his account can be interpreted somewhat broader and more differentiated. And as we might know, there are many kinds of hierarchy: master and slave, parent and child, and husband and wife, and king and subjects, and even in the temporary office holding among citizens, there is hierarchy, but it is not, fixed, the notation there. So these hierarchies are not the same, right? Each relation has a different basis, different end, and different limit. So I think integrating women into political life does not simply mean abolition, just simply eliminating all hierarchy, or making the family into a polis. Instead, it indicates that we shouldn't let household hierarchy determine civic standing. And women also, should enter political life as citizens, capable of deliberation, judgment, and participation in rule. So political authority is not like household authority. It's not like household hierarchy. It must be legal, accountable, and oriented to the common good, or common advantage. So I think, all in all, Aristotle's broader conception of hierarchy helps us to see that not every hierarchy is domination. It is different, right? It has different end. It should be served the common end there. And it gives us a reason that to reject, fixed, gendered hierarchy. If we recognize women as a free and deliberative persons, I think that's my answer. I'm not sure if I answer correctly to your question.
No, I mean, thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. And I really, really want to follow you, but I'm just not entirely convinced, because I do think that the specific household that Aristotle designs carries so much weight, because the origins of all constitutional life is a first woman, a husband, then an ox. It's a sort of it's so fundamental that I'm just always trying to that I would love up. We don't have to kind of go deeper into it, but I think it's making it's a bit difficult to say, oh, that's right. So Aristotle knows about the problematic of hierarchies, and the entire point is that the city is not a state, and that therefore hierarchies can be rethought. I mean, I'm sure you can do that, but the point of the equality of the citizen comes, and now the family is important again, comes because they are very, very equal in, when in their familial relationships, because they are like brothers. And they are not like any other of these relationships. They are like brothers. And therefore, I think it's important to look at that. Or if you say, yeah, but he also says that the constitutional relationship is like that of husband and wife. Yes, but here the problems that you explained so well are there, that in the relationship of husband and wife, there is no reciprocity, and the woman is always sort of the one who's not the active part, or the judge in the relationship. So I think your answer was wonderful, but I'm always a little bit, I wonder whether Aristotle would agree with this, or whether he says, well, the whole world works in effect that the female principle is, or that the male principle is dominant, the female principle is more receiving, and so on. So I take your point. I think it's great, but I would love to know more. But I think for now, it's absolutely great. Then I will go just to my last question, and that is no, I think we'll go with I just had so much to think about. So a broader question that we could think about is, when I read your paper, I realized that many of the quotes that you used, I use in my own research on early modern Aristotelianism, to show that to show that Aristotle actually makes very strong the structural similarities of the household and the state. It's also maybe because we're coming from different traditions. So in my history of political thought tradition, it's very well assumed that the household is not political, and in fact that the household is not important. So I was with early modern thinkers writing against this, and showed, oh, no, it is important. We have to understand the household in order to understand politics. But my point is that many of the quotes where you say, okay, this shows the deep cut, the deep dissimilarities, the deep division between oikos and polis, can also, if you think about it, also used to show the other thing, namely that they are quite similar. They are quite important to each other. So it just depends on the standpoint. It was equally very, very convinced by your paper. So that led me to think that should we maybe not think that Aristotle is playing with us here. And also, if you know about Aristotle rhetorics. So do we actually do Aristotle a disservice if we try to find really strict borders of the public and the private, the household and the state, or as I do, if I just try to prove that these borders are not there or they are porous? So I was wondering whether we should not rather concede that sometimes Aristotle uses the household to show the similarities to the polity, and in another point of view, he shows the differences to the political life. And should we maybe give that not a little bit more thought? So this, and kind of understand that he plays with ambiguities, and he therefore also maybe plays a little bit with us. What do you think?
Okay. So you think the Aristotle actually compares many similarities, and he makes many analogy, right, between the household and the political regimes in the city, right? So how we understand the similarity and the dissimilarity between them. So I think that is very clearly written in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, book 8, maybe book 8, at chapter 10, right? So I think I agree, and I should more precise about it in the revised paper. I think in that chapter, Aristotle use analogies a lot between household relations and the political regime. He compares parental rule to kinship, and relation between husband and wife to aristocracy, and the relation between brothers to something like a democracy. So in my reading, in my understanding, the analogy itself may indicate a certain resemblance. There is similarity between them, but I think analogy, right? It's not a statement. It does not by itself establish isomorphism, I think. So maybe we need a clearer textual basis that is beginning of Aristotle politics. He, as you might already know, he explicitly rejected the view they are same. So I think his use of analogy should be distinguished from a statement or claim of isomorphism. So I think there are some more texture, but I might not just cite here. So I think,
If I can just interject, so I think my whole point was that I kind of, after reading your paper and thinking about it, was thinking, okay, maybe the interesting thing is that you can, with Aristotle, argue for both. And the question is, for both sort of the point of view that it's very distinct, or the point of view that it's actually more closely related than some people say. So and I was wondering whether this might not be exactly the point, right? The point is not strict, you are right or I'm right, but the point might be to think about exactly the ambiguities and exactly sort of the grays, right? Not the white and black, but the grays, and the sort of, that this is more like fluid and more like maybe a river that he likes, and not like concrete walls. So And because, you know, the first sentence that you also quoted earlier, or the first paragraph, I mean, he doesn't say, I mean, at some readings, you can say he says that, you know, the household and the state is not the same. But what he's actually saying is the rule of the statesman is different from the rule of the king, is different from the rule of the householder, is different. So he doesn't say, because he doesn't say the rule of the king and the statesman is one, and then the householder or the paterfamilias, the head of the family and the slaveholder is, you know, different. But all these different forms of rule, you know, are different. So that to me is a different argument than saying that he's here completely delineating rule in the polis from rule in the oikos, for example, right? And then you can make a whole argument about that, and we don't have to go in that. But I'm just saying, isn't the interesting bit that it is ambiguous? And should we maybe think about this sort of in the future?
Sure.
More?
Thank you very much. I think I might just say something, add more in my revised paper. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you for, you know, I mean, I learned so much, and now I have the pleasure to first call on Professor Quack. And
all right. Thank you very much.
So, and you have some questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Huang Laoshi. I want to say that
thank
this
you,
paper,
Professor Kwang.
will make a significant contribution to our book product. It effectively demonstrates that, you know, the key issue is not just whether filial piety matters for political life, but how these family feelings translate into publicly justifiable forms of, I can say, democratic civility. And I enjoy reading, you know, your paper very much. Okay, as an, you know, kind of editor, I just want to have 2 or 3 questions. The first question is about Liang Qichao. My first question concerns your paper's use of Liang Qichao at the very beginning as a kind of example of extension from family to state. I think Liang Qichao certainly connect, you know, filial piety, family ethics, and political order, but I wonder whether we should be, you know, careful about, you know, treating him as a kind of representative example of the Confucian understanding of filial piety as such. As you know, that Liang was writing what you quoted in the context of late Qing reform and early Republican nation building under the pressure of foreign intrusion and global rise of nationalism. So his use of familiar or filial language can be read as a modern nationalist reworking of Confucian resources rather than a straightforward expression of classical Confucian familial political isomorphism. So that, you know, kind of is that I want to ask a little bit about why you use that out, but maybe I'm going to go with it because time is running out. Is I will, you know, kind of tell you later in my editorial note, because I just actually I think that, you know, kind of the time period, especially, you know, Xi Minxiu, and after his, you know, 1903 journey to the United States, actually there's some kind of is that the idiosyncratic isomorphism. It is not a kind of Confucian isomorphism, so that I think that you might need to distinguish, you know, between these two, and then clearly show that if you want to, it's why, you know, this is an important case for showing how filial political isomorphism can become linked to statism or what you worry now. But I think that, you know, this is not a question, it's just a quick, you know, comments, because Liang Qichao is pretty much, you know, kind of somehow case that give rise to, you know, kind of polemic issue on your paper. Okay, second question is about, you know, kind of a little bit, you know, kind of let's get into the kind of more current debate that is about Roger Ames and Joseph Chan. My question is how the paper positions itself between Ames' family-centered account and Joseph Chan's critique of familialism. In Ames' account, as far as I'm concerned, the very candidate for shared minimalist morality is not Confucian filial piety at all, but family feeling more broadly. But surely, kind of in his account, shall functions as an important, kind of Confucian practice through which family feelings, kind of is cultivated, extended. But because Ames plays, kind of filial piety within a larger parallel between family state and Qianxia, filial piety can appear to carry a great deal of political weight. So I wonder, what exactly your critic targets? Is the problem that Ames gives, kind of with a shower too much political work, or that he treats, family feeling as too easily extendable from family to politics, or that the family state change framework lacks, kind of, a kind of institutional mediation? I will, put aside Joseph Chen. I will give you, kind of my editorial note, kind of saying something about Joseph Chen. But I just want to focus on Roger Ames, because Roger Ames is a kind of representative figure saying something about isomorphism, so to speak. So that is my question.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very helpful question. I think you're right. In Roger Ames' account, and I have to clarify these parts later on. I agree with your formulation. In Ames' account, the candidate for shared minimalist morality is not filial piety itself, but family feeling. So shall is better understood as one central Confucian practice through which family feeling is lived, cultivated, and extended. So I think I should be more careful not to collapse family feeling into shall, or to suggest that Ames simply makes filial piety itself into the whole basis of his political philosophy. And the problem, as I stated, it begins when family feeling is placed. When family feeling is placed within an isomorphic relation among family, state, and world. So at that point, family feelings starts to carry a very heavy political burden. It is no longer not anymore only the beginning of moral formation. It becomes the very source from which social and political order is supposed to grow, extend. So my worry is not that family feeling is politically irrelevant. It of course matter politically, but the question is precisely what has to happen to family based dispositions. What should be happen, and what has to happen to this disposition before they can become civic virtues or democratic civilities. So
you are not talking about family affection as such, but you just worry that somehow, micro and macro structure, they are supposed to be different, however, put in together as a way that one, kind of with their structure, between them. That is what you are worried about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, my third question is just like, what, Anna has been pushing you a bit, and I just, put that, question a bit different. I find your rendering of Aristotle text are persuasive, and particularly your claim that political rule and political friendship require law, citizenship, public deliberation, accountability, and rotation. And I also agree that these are not simply given conditions. They have to be established, obtained, maintained, protected, especially because actual political life often begins from asymmetrical power relations. And in this sense, political rule, political friendship seem to indicate the minimum condition, I could say this way, under which political relations can become properly civic. But my question follows from this point. I wonder whether the contrast between family and police should be clarified not only in terms of institutional mediation, but also in terms of different ideas proper to each. There might be, kind of some methodological asymmetry. In your paper, you're dealing with Aristotle. Because when the paper discussed, household rule, Aristotle appears to be read mainly through the actual asymmetries of the household, such as the paternal, marital, and despotic, kind of rule. But when the paper turns to political rule, Aristotle is read more, I could say prescriptively, normatively, through the lens of the idea of rule among free and equal citizens. So my concern is whether the paper is comparing family rule, household rule, and political rule on the same analytical level. So that, kind of question would be somehow, are we comparing the family in actual hierarchical form with the political rule in its ideal form? Or I could put it differently, would it be helpful to clarify whether Aristotle's account of household rule is being used somehow descriptively, normatively, and then compare it with the political rule on parallel terms? Isn't that, kind of is that, better, you think, kind of you put these two together?
Yeah, I think this question is very important and very challenging. It's somehow related to what Professor Becker just raised. So thank you very much for this question. I appreciate it very much because it reveals attention, right? And I have to address more explicitly in the paper. So I think you're right that my discussion of household rule has been presented somewhat descriptively, and this may create the impression I'm dealing with, births according to different analytical dimensions. But I think I might also have some thought on my mind about the normative significance or prescriptive significance of about why Aristotle says about the household rule. This dimension concerns who should rule and why. So in this sense,
who should rule and how?
Yeah, and how? Yes, in what way? Yes. So in this sense, I think Aristotle's analysis of household role is not merely a description of existing relations. It also has some normative or prescriptive purpose, because by examining different forms of rule in the household, Aristotle invites us to train our judgment or train our, you can say, practical wisdom, phronesis, to see, to find, and to discern the difference, the qualitative differences among different modes of rule. So I think I can not deny the investigation because he spent so much, energy and lens for the household rule in the politics. That investigation is very essential philosophical endeavor. It helps us distinguish not only household relation is differentiated, is different, right? But also we can distinguish political rule from the household, from despotism or patriarchy. So we can cultivate the political judgment required for governing free and equal citizens.
So that we have to see carefully about the kind of way in which Aristotle demarcate true politics from despotism and patriarchy, thereby what you want to say about the political role or political sense that can be required for,
Yeah.
kind of ruler, even, kind of is that, in the political rule to govern free and equal citizens. That is what you wanted to say, right? So that you have to demonstrate that, kind of somehow
Sure.
in that, say we can, see you are not simply talking about political rule. It's totally, separate from, kind of Aristotle's philosophical endeavor.
Yeah,
As
sure,
you said,
sure.
kind of is that let us, discern the differences, as you mean qualitative, right? So that I think that might be, kind of somehow helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you
and
very
I-
much. Thank you.
Great. So I'm sure that's very helpful. Time is running and we have a big speaker list or question list. So if that's okay, I would just now, I think, just call for the next question. But first, so I think, so
Josh
Joshua
there.
Mason is not, is he there?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
there.
So then please, I know that Joshua Mason has a
Hi,
question,
Josh.
so please.
Hello, everybody.
And
Good morning.
I give the floor to you.
So I would just say overall, reading the paper was a pleasure because it's so
Thank
clear
you.
and it moves us from idea to idea and argument to argument and just sort of carries us
Thank
along.
you.
I thought it was really sharp, right? In many of the ways it argued.
Thank you very
I have
much.
one longer question, one shorter one.
Uh-huh.
So one is a sort of slippage that I'm afraid I see, right? Aristotle criticizes, you say, those who suppose the statesman, the household manager, and the master are essentially the same. And I think essentially the same is your language, where Aristotle says they differ not in kind, but only in number. But essentially the same seems different from analogous or even isomorphism, which has similar structures, but not essentially the same. So every analogy has analogies, but also disanalogies. Yep. Raising a child is like raising a horse. Yes, but no. And so what we're really doing here is sort of teasing out what is the yes and what is the no. Later in the paper, you sort of set it up. You say the household and the polis may both involve philia, habituation, and concern for the good. And so maybe those like Liang Qichao and Ames are focusing on those structures, aspects of family that do get carried into politics, whereas you're focusing on the differences and the sort of in the relation of family to politics, what makes the difference? And it seems like the project in both cases might simply be specifying, we're teasing out, what is it that does move from family to politics? And what is it that is distinct? And so when we say that analogy and isomorphism mean that we want the same relationships or the same kind of power dynamics, but what we want is something analogous. I was looking at the Shaojing, the classic of filial piety, and it says something like, for the lower officials, the shi, the feeling of respect that they have for their father is what they transfer for the Lord, and not necessarily the structural aspects of the relationship, but the feeling of respect or the feeling of love. So essentially the question is, are we really targeting people who say these are the same, or is the project sort of saying where is it yes and where is it no?
Thank you very much. I think I agree with you, and this is a very helpful clarification. I think I also should formulate my target more clearly. I do not mean actually that Liang or Roger Ames simply identify the family and the political society as essentially the same. Analogy is not identity, and even isomorphic language does not necessarily mean total sameness, right? So what actually concerns me at this moment is the point at which the analogy begins to carry too much burden, carry too much normative weight, so that family feelings appears to provide the primary model for political order without sufficient attention to, the transformation and the mediation. So in this sense, I think I'm also trying to, maybe I should clarify more clearly about, tease out, both similarities and the differences. The household and the filial both involve, right? Both involve same thing like love, filial, habituation, concern for the good. These are those elements that come across those categories. But the political relation also requires something quite different, and the family does not provide by itself, right? Civic standing, equality, public justification, law deliberation, judge and adjudication, accountability, and the reciprocal rule. So my argument is, it's not nothing transfers from family to polis, but instead, what transfers must be transformed. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. The idea that we have something, but we're not done. Once
Yeah,
we've
we're
got
not
our
done.
family
Yes.
relations. So
Yeah.
the second question is pretty quick about that one. This education for democratic participation, right? We need to mediate and transform our original. Is this in school? Is this on the job training? Is this sort of intellectual? We learn what democracy is, we learn what equality is, or do we put people into situations that habituate themselves? So I just sort of wonder, if we want citizens to be like this, what kind of educational program do you see?
Yes, I think in that sense, I might think Aristotle might be too optimistic, right? In assuming citizens are rational enough to come together to deliberate well, and accept a common decision. But I think, on the contrary, I think Aristotle is not that optimistic, and that's why he says so much about we need law, we need habituation, we need rhetoric and persuasion, we need civic education, and all those things I think comes together to show that rationality is very weak or fragile, and it's politically formed. So I think Aristotle knows very well that politics is full of conflicts, is faction, private interest, computation, and the danger of domination. I think he's not naive. So in this sense, political friendship, in my reading, is not a harmonious agreement already given, before politics. It is a very fragile civic relation that should be maintained. You should be, just we have to work hard, and it must be formed, through all those things, institution and practices. So citizens deliberate, not because they are sufficiently rational, they are already rational, but because political rule gives them, public setting, public standing, give those conditions, we, come together, although we have partial interests, emotions, fears, and claims about justice. But, in political rule, we can, speak, we can contest, persuade, and listen to each other and judge and be persuaded. So I think Aristotle, yes, he have a very, idea of rational political life, but it's not a fantasy. He's not an intellectualist fantasy. It depends on habituation, law, public education, institution, and all come together, civic education. So I think this is also related to maybe you said education for democratic participation, what it is about. So I think it involves both Aristotle's account of civic education is both preparation, involves both preparation and participation. So civic formation requires public and preparatory education. He says that speech alone is not enough. Character must be shaped, and but it's not fully completed before political life begins. It continues, right? So in political life, in democratic participation, we continue that civic education, right? So by rule and being ruled, we learn, what is just, what is common good. So that is also, self-education, self-education. So democratic participation in that sense is still in the process of civic education. And yes, that's my answer.
That's good. That gives me hope that our democratic politicians can continue to learn to do better.
Yes.
Maybe they're still figuring out how to come to rational agreement.
I
Thank you.
hope, yeah, I hope so too. Thank
So
you.
I think sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to move on. I just have to quickly say that I have to get my daughter from the nursery, and the Danes are very strict, so I have to leave in 15 minutes. So, and Professor Quack will go on hosting when I leave. So if this will be during the next discussion. So let me just say thank you so much for this wonderful paper and for this opportunity. But we have decided that we will now ask for or call for Duchan first. So PhD student Duchan, I give the floor over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I received. Thank you, Professor Wang Mengxiao. Thank you, Professor Annabelle. My question concerns the relation between parental education and civic education. In your paper, one of your core arguments is that Aristotle treats the family as the pedagogical and transitional site rather than as a proto-political model. But in your discussion of child education, in that part, you also mentioned that Aristotle insists that the community should be responsible for children's education, while family or parental education functions as a kind of substitute when the community fails to provide proper education. If this is the case, I wonder, does the pedagogical and the transitional role of the family have genuine normative significance, or is it mainly a practical fallback or practical expedient? I would be grateful if you could say more about how parental education, yes, and civic education are related in Aristotle's account. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I think I also have to clarify more clearly. I would not like to describe paternal education as merely practical fallback. Because for Aristotle, education is always political relevant because it concerns the formation of future citizens. So paternal education is also very important. So family, but we should see the different role there. We should see the different difference between paternal rule and the public education. So in the family, it is the first site, right? It's a beginning where children, the habituation of children begins. Children first learn, trust, care, and affection, and obedience in family. but they are not yet civic virtue, but they are the very much material. Yes, they are the very much material on which civic formation later on can work. So paternal education initiates this moral formation, but civic education reorients it. It's not replace it, it's not replace it, it reorients that formation toward the polity and public judgment and common life. So that is why I call the family, pedagogical and transitional. It forms our early dispositions, but those dispositions must be, publicly specified before they become civic. That's my answer. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. So I will now officially hand over the proceedings to Professor
Okay,
Kwak.
thank you very much. I will take
And
over
thank
it.
you.
I sincerely
Goodbye,
appreciate your
everyone.
wonderful, kind of moderation and fantastic comments. I sincerely appreciate it, Anna. Okay, see you later. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, now we have, it's already, we started getting late, and then, already way past the 10 o'clock. So that let me have only two questions from the floor. Okay, so now I want to have a question from Zhu Haoyuan. Can you hear me?
Professor, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, Professor Huang, thank you for your wonderful and inspiring lecture, and I learned a lot because I'm also working on this issue. Your talk refreshed my understanding. And my question concerns the scope of Aristotle's distinction between household rule and political rule, because I think the paper emphasizes a demanding model of political rule. Rule among free and equal citizens, public deliberation, and ruling and being ruled in turn. But I think there are also other forms of regimes in polis, because Aristotle also discusses a regime such as kingship and aristocracy, where I think equality, rotation, and shared deliberation seem much less central. So my question is, does the paper's rejection of family and polis isomorphism apply to the polis as such across Aristotle's different regimes types, or mainly to political rule in its stranger sense among free and equal citizens? If it's the latter, might some regimes, especially kingship, appeared closer to household or a parental rule? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think your question mentions a very special case about the kinship. So, and your question is also related to what we just discussed about the isomorphism. I mean the analogy, between household relations and civic relations. So Aristotle also says that kinship looks paternal, right? Because there are asymmetrical relations there, and the king rules the subject only for their own interest, and what else he said, and it's for the benefication there, superiority there. So it's pretty much like father and a child relationship. So it is very partial. It shows the resemblance, but still I would like to say that kinship is not political, right? So, and if we look carefully in the book, book 3 of politics, actually we can find out Aristotle actually distinguish that kinship is not political rule. kinship is not a political rule in the strict sense, because it lacks reciprocal ruling and being ruled among free and equal citizens. So this brings to, another question: how Aristotle exactly thinks of kinship, right? Aristotle is not like, Plato. So Plato might think kinship is also, political, and the king, has political rule there. But Aristotle never says that, right? So he does not think the kinship is compatible to political rule, and he does not make the philosopher king model of the political rule. So I think in generally political rule, you're right, is normative, and it is in the we can say the strict sense. We have so many, interconnected ingredients or elements there. And I think Aristotle's point about what political life should be like and how we should organize our life in the polis is very different from Plato. That's why I think I brought this, Aristotle conception of the political is in a strict sense. So all in all, I think Aristotle does not support the isomorphism altogether, I think. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's have a last question. Ian, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, one question, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor Huang. My question concerns the relation between institutional medication and the distinctive character of family feeling. The paper argues that familial moral disposition must undergo institutional mediation, especially through the depersonalizing authority of law, in order to become publicly justifiable civic virtue. However, if family feeling must be transformed by law, equality, reciprocity, and accountability, how much of its original character can remain? So I'm be grateful if you could say more about how much continuity remains between family feelings and civic virtue after this process of mediation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. My answer would be that family feeling does not remain unchanged after institutional mediation, but it also does not disappear. So you worry that after the institutional, mediation, what the family feelings remains, but I think it does not simply disappear. So in its original household form, family feeling is, intimate, partial, and asymmetric. It is directly toward one's own kin, right? Parents, children, spouse, other relatives. So it cannot simply become democratic civility without transformation. If directly extended, there might many problems, right? Just comes out. So I think what remains after the institutional mediation is not the family relation itself, but the moral capacities first cultivated through family life, like concern for others, gratitude, trust, and a sense of responsibility. And these capacities must be transformed by those institutional mediations. So family feelings remains a moral source, but it contributes moral formation. But institution reorient those feelings and those affections, those dispositions in a different way. So I think it does not remain unchanged, but it also does not disappear. I think that's my what on my mind now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. I think it is time to wrap up the workshop. Thanks a lot, Professor Huang. It was a wonderful
you.
session. Yeah, we learned a great deal from your talk today. And
Thank you
frankly
very
speaking,
much.
since most of the papers in the collection discuss the problems with the drawing a sharp distinction between family and wider society, this paper stands out for its value focus on the public and institutional conditions required to transform familiar sentiments into civic virtue. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwang. I enjoy
Okay.
a lot.
All right, thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate it. And thank you, to everyone who joined us today. This is the Global Justice Workshop organized by the Department of Philosophy, Zhuhai Campus, Sun Yat-sen University. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you.
Bye bye.